Hey, what's up, everyone? I am taking a brief break from my bar study just to talk about an interesting article, or more so the underlying issues of an article. There's an article written by David Gordon called The Molyneux Problem, talking about Stefan Molyneux's book, Universally Preferable Behavior. I'm not going to talk too much about the article and book per se, more so the underlying conflicts of defining what is universally preferable behavior and morality. And this is going to be taken from an atheist, or assuming there is no God, perspective, for the sake of coming from the basis that Stefan comes from. So, first off, he tries to categorize or conceptualize what universal principles look like and how they should be formulated. And the biggest problem with universal principles is that they don't have the ability to be measured in a grand scale, and that is a universal scale, without an overriding end result. In other words, a certain direction that is an end result. There can't really be morality. Like there isn't a universal sense of right and wrong. You just can't prove it in the state of the universe if you don't believe that there's consciousness. In other words, not a universal consciousness, not a direction. And even assuming there was a universal direction, for example, let's just say we take the Big Bang and then we say that humans, animals, everything has evolved from basic amino acids, proteins, into unicellular organisms and thereforth, we might have upward mobility, but the fact that there's upward mobility doesn't necessarily prove a right or wrongness about it. And if we were to take empirical evidence, which I think Stefan, that's my biggest critique of his work, is he is so philosophical that he forgets you have to take reality into the picture, assuming you're not a nihilist. And if you look at reality, what's reality? Okay, all the organisms that pretty much are around us, other living creatures, kill each other, like, as if it's nothing. I mean, there might be, of course, there's nurturing and stuff like that, especially in certain types of collected groups of animals, ants for their queen, or, especially more developed animals, they care for their young. I mean, unless you're a hamster, you might eat it. But nonetheless, the overriding theme is animals struggling with each other to survive. Reproduction's the end goal. Everything is about reproducing, modification, change over time, blah, blah. You end up with more information changed through the mutations and advancement in terms of sentience. In other words, greater intelligence. Now, even then, again, greater intelligence is not necessarily the end result. It could be a byproduct as another species or other organism, living or even non-living, moves through time and space. It's not an end result. It could be a current end result. It could be proximate, but there isn't an end proof. And actually, morality does have, fortunately, unfortunately, has to rely on an end result for universal principles. And I say this dogmatically because you have to have a underlying reason of why something is. And when I say underlying reason of why something is, because we're talking about human behavior. When we're talking about human behavior, we're talking about subjective preferences or experiences. And an individual, from empirical evidence that I think we can test, control for, and repeat, would show that one human's desires for their life and how others are in relation to them is vastly different from the next person. One person may desire another person's property. They may desire another person's status. They may think that another organism is not fit to live and wish to end their life, whatever. And this can go, of course, all the way down, down to the smallest of organisms. They, destroy or kill each other, whether it's for food or sometimes just out of spite or whatever is going on in their hormones. So then when we see that there's this conflict among sentient beings, that kind of disrupts this universal principle. And then what happens is you have to devolve into proximate morality, and that is when you state that individual human beings might see collectively, and unfortunately, all you individualists are going to be faced with collectivism now, but that's pretty much where this goes. Collectivism suggests that groups of people who see the mutual benefit of acting in a certain way toward each other creates this morality. In other words, people generally agree that they should not use physical violence or force against each other. That could be a collective creation of proximate morality. And the counter to the universal, if you want a real-world example, this example I usually give, and it's pretty much knocks it out of the ballpark. Homeless man is walking along a street. Rich man who has no other family or heirs or friends. He's just, a rich businessman, but he's old. Drives up in his Mercedes, gets out of his car, goes to a niche restaurant. The homeless man sees him as he's walking up, begs for money. The man scoffs him, calls him a dirty name, and continues on his way into the little niche restaurant. Homeless man walks away and for a couple hours eventually stumbles upon a rich neighborhood, recognizes the rich man's car, decides that night to break into the old man's house. He sees the old man as he goes to the window that was partially open for breeze, strangles him, finds that he has money underneath his bed because he's a miser and he really likes to keep control of his money, gets the money, flees to Mexico, and sets up a cabana and lives happily ever after. That would be an example of morality for that man. His situation was bettered because A, he didn't suffer any consequences individually, B, nobody gave a crap about the old man. He had no other connections. He was near the end of his days, so his death materially wasn't that different. It wasn't that big of a deal. Now, of course, someone could also then argue, oh, he would discover the cure for cancer the next day. But this is the hypothetical I'm giving. Assuming he wouldn't have, the man is now better off. That is the homeless man. He now has money. He now is surviving in a better strait than he was before. Can you say that that was immoral? In the universal sense, is that did that person better himself any different than the lion killing the zebra? In the end, both would be acting for their proximate self-interest. And when you compare that to, as I mentioned before, the proximate collectivist self-interest, you start to see the pattern where the universality breaks down. In as much as one might say, oh, it'd be really great if everybody treat each other this way because that is generally the way people like to be treated. It's not a proof text for, oh, this is right or wrong. It's, what I mean? There is no such thing as right or wrong within the long-term scope. And in fact, we could even ascribe a morality or in other words, an objective of the universe, assuming the universe had a different objective, right? In other words, it was headed toward a different direction, consciously or unconsciously, doesn't really matter for this purpose. If that person who commits murder survives and advances, and maybe they are the ones who lead to a more advanced state of mental development, and the universe's direction is toward greater and more powerful sentience, is there anything that's really wrong? And again, this is where intellectual honesty has to come in. And this is the breaking point. You have to be intellectually honest and say, you don't know for a fact what the grand scheme of the universe is, whether there is an end result for morality. You have to end up conceding that under a system in which the universe has no sort of ultimate ruler consciousness, that it is truly a random, purposeless creation, that there isn't anything other than proximate solving of morality. In other words, it's simply agreement for your short-term benefit, and there's no place that you can currently go to find that out. There isn't a star constellation in the sky that says, here's the 10 rules of the universe. Gluons and protons and electrons and quarks are not like amassing themselves into a language that says, oh, here's exactly how humans are to act to better themselves and reach a certain state. Assuming that something is preferable for the universe as a whole. That cockroaches aren't supposed to be the dominant species in the end of the day. And these are the end goals that people typically think about. They think longevity, leading to immortality. In other words, health, mental soundness, higher IQ. These are seen as great goods of proximate value to most humans that argue for this type of morality. Peace, prosperity, intellectual growth. But again, those values, those subjectively held by humans, may not necessarily be the ultimate values of the universe. And again, if we were to just simply take cues from the jungle, it would be a very violent view on how the world works. So now, of course, one can still argue that, humans are more evolved and processed, and therefore they can move beyond that. But again, you're working from a lack of empirical evidence. It's not in the sky, it's not in the ground, and if we were to take a look at our other carbon-based life forms, we're not getting any good cues from there either. So again, intellectual honesty at the end of the day has to say that the universally preferable behavior doesn't really come down to a logical axiom. There isn't a statement that can say, murder is wrong all the time, because if you're doing it all the time and the converse is not murdering, then therefore it is a moral good, and that's the proof text. It doesn't have an end goal except the self-assumed end goal of non-aggression. And while that's great, that I certainly approve of that, the non-aggression principle isn't on its own a moral proof. It is a preferred behavior for how the average person might want to be treated, but it isn't necessarily what every person would want. Some people might get crazy pleasures out of murdering people, and to them that is their highest, achievement and goal in their mind. I mean, and of course, this is relative, again, speaking to the descriptive terms, but I would say that that person is messed up, but to them that might be the the ultimate. The ultimate human in the universe's context is one who is ruthless, has no emotional pull, is not stirred by emotions whatsoever, and they are the most fit to survive and control and command and lead. Again, looking at the rest of humanity and animals, wouldn't be too much of a surprise if that was the case. So, that's my summary on it, and I know I didn't present, a syllogism for logical purposes. Rather, I'm just presenting hypotheticals and, I guess you could say, a pointed lack of observation for morality, coming from a, asentient, atheistic point of view. Not saying that it's proof of morality in a theistic sense, but just saying this is being intellectually honest about the topic. Alright, well, take care, guys, and I will talk to you all later.